I attach particular importance to honoring my commitments in the same spirit I had on several occasions stated at the time of the adoption of the Constitution of the Third Republic in 2016 that I did not wish to run for another presidential term. Consequently, I would like to solemnly announce to you that I have decided not to be a candidate in the presidential election.
Well, we stopped doing anything since there were elections so that people wouldn't say it was IB who was against the election, that it was IB who didn't want peace. I said, stay radio silent. Let's prepare ourselves because we're not God. We're not invincible. But when you know the truth, when you know the reality on the ground, we were convinced of one thing, that these elections would end in armed conflict. So let's prepare accordingly. And we prepared ourselves. They went ahead with the elections. What was the result? Here we are. And they couldn't find any other solution but to take up arms to attack Abobo and Anyama. Thank God, by the limited resources we had, your blessing, we were able to hold out in the resistance. We fought as best we could. We resisted gradually, slowly, and we managed to arm ourselves from them, from our opponents. Because it's true, we were arming ourselves. When they fell into our ambushes, it allowed us to get a few weapons, and that's the will of God. Without God, you cannot achieve what we have achieved. We don't need to beat our chest. That's not true. It's not because we are strong. It's not because we are miraculous, but it's God who made everything happen. We are only simple actors. We are servants of the people and servants of God. That's all. And that is our mission. We destabilize the command of the fancy general staff of God. That's the reality. They tried everything. They sent the second, they sent the BA, they sent the armored battalion, they sent the pastor, they sent the entire coalition. All the commanders we know, we went to school together, we went through military training together, we know them. They sent everything that was considered Ivorian most. They couldn't stand up to your children. Thanks to your blessings, thanks to God.
It was just after 6 p.m. when every screen in Côte d'Ivoire went dark. No music, no signal, just silence. Then suddenly, the feed returned. Grainy, unsteady, live. There, sitting alone at the desk of the national broadcaster RTI, was a man who had ruled for 14 years. No flag behind him, no generals at his side, just a worn-out face and a shaking voice. Alassane Ouattara. He adjusted his collar, looked straight into the lens, then spoke, without emotion. To the people of Côte d'Ivoire, I address you not as your president, but as a citizen of this nation. The air across the country froze. In markets, people stopped mid-transaction. In barracks, soldiers turned up the volume. In homes, families clutched hands. For the sake of national unity, and to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, I have taken the decision to resign, effective immediately. No applause, no orchestra, just 5 seconds of silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping the floor as he stood up and walked off screen. Just like that, it was over. The regime that survived protests, elections, rebellions, and international scandals collapsed under the weight of one voice. And not his, because everyone knew it wasn't just pressure. It was a warning, delivered days earlier, from a commander who had never stepped into politics, until now. And somewhere in Ouagadougou, far from the cameras, Captain Ibrahim Traoré received a short message from his aide. He did it. It's done. Traoré said nothing. He just closed his notebook and whispered, "The people moved." And that was all it took. The resignation was public, but the rebellion that caused it, that was born in the shadows, behind the walls of military compounds across Côte d'Ivoire. In Boaké, the grumbling started quietly. A captain's pay was delayed for the third month in a row. A young soldier was discharged for refusing to fire during a peaceful protest, his only crime, saying, "My rifle is not for shooting Ivorians." In Kohogo, an elite unit returned from a mission to find that their families had gone days without water or food rations. Meanwhile, armored cars were being fueled daily, not for defense, but for presidential convoys. The hypocrisy was no longer invisible. It was everywhere, in the mess halls, in the barracks, in the silence that grew heavier each day. But it wasn't anger that spread. It was doubt. Doubt in orders. Doubt in the man at the top. Doubt in whether they were still protecting a republic, or just extending the life of a regime. And in that doubt, a new kind of discipline took root. Meetings stopped happening on the record. Briefings became shorter. When orders came from Abidjan, some units simply didn't respond. Others responded late. One platoon answered a direct command with just 2 words: "We're listening." But they weren't listening to Ouattara anymore. In whispered conversations, one name kept surfacing: Commander Kone, not a politician, not a warlord. A mid-ranking officer who had never posted a selfie or chased headlines, but he had something rare: respect. Men trusted him, not because he promised power, but because he didn't fear truth. He never raised his voice. He never called for a coup. He just asked one question over and over: if we stood down today, would the people stand up tomorrow? And in mess halls and dormitories, across every region of the country, the answer began to take shape. A revolution was forming. Not from activists, not from militias, but from the very people trained to protect the regime. They weren't preparing for war. They were preparing to stop lying. It wasn't a declaration of war. It wasn't even a direct statement. But to those who understood power, it was a warning wrapped in wisdom. 3 days before Ouattara's resignation, a regional security summit was held in Ouagadougou. Cameras were invited. Flags from the Sahel Alliance stood tall. And at the center, wearing his red beret, calm as ever, sat Captain Ibrahim Traoré. He spoke last. The room was quiet. The world watched. Africa is tired of speaking.